This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Look at that. Isn't it incredible? It's just a little island off the coast of the United States, but some people call it the capital of the world. I call it home. My name is Stokes Mitchell, and that is New York City. You see, Manhattan is a grid crisscrossed with streets whose names have become icons. Park Avenue, for instance, represents posh. Madison Avenue is shorthand for advertising. And here in my favorite neck of the woods, Broadway is of course synonymous with, well, Broadway.
But one street embodies the New York state of mind better than any other. The drive to strive, to achieve, to inspire, and acquire.
This great street is Fifth Avenue.
New York is where the world comes to see if they are good enough to make it. And it seems everyone who comes to New York eventually makes their way to Fifth Avenue. Not only is it the literal center of the city, dividing the east and west sides, but these 6.5 miles define the essence of New York. Fifth Avenue is like an eclectic string of beads with Greenwich Village at one end and Harlem at the other, threaded with gems of finance, culture, and style. But still, there's always been room on the Strand for the awestruck tourist, the delicate dowager, or the kid from the sticks just looking to make a name for himself.
In a sense, it sort of defined elegance and yet was accessible, so that it was something you could aspire to, but you could get there. It's not a gated community.
I was a cadet at a military academy when I was going to high school, and I was leading my school, New York Military Academy, right down the middle of the street. And that's the first time I consciously remember being on Fifth Avenue.
Walking along the street, and we actually saw a real celebrity, our very first, a kid actress by the name of Jane Withers, and she was wearing a mink coat. It was the first one I'd ever seen, and I touched it, and I was walking on Fifth Avenue. It was like heaven.
Fifth Avenue might be shorthand for New York City, but the words Fifth Avenue didn't even appear on a map until 1811. Back then, avenue was a lofty description for a rutted dirt path lined with cattle markets and squatters' shacks.
People lived first above their store, or they lived above their warehouse or their shipping yard. Then, as New York prospered in the late 17th and 18th century, people had more money. They wanted to get away from living above the store, particularly as there was probably a saloon on either side because New York City had so many saloons. So they moved up. Well-to-do people finally arrived at Washington Square, which was the country.
Fifth Avenue actually begins here, in Greenwich Village at Washington Square Park.
In 1833, this was the hub of New York society, and people's lives were expected to be as neat and as tidy as the row houses behind me.
In his novel, Washington Square, Henry James wrote, "It has a kind of established repose which is not of frequent occurrence in other quarters of the long, shrill city. It has a riper, richer, more honorable look."
Before Washington Square was a fancy address, this was a potter's field where criminals and indigents were buried. As a matter of fact, more than a few of them met their maker at this giant elm behind me, also known as Hangman's Elm.
Despite that gruesome detail, residents of the neighborhood commissioned the renowned architect Stanford White to design a monument commemorating the 100th anniversary of the inauguration of George Washington in 1897. White's temporary wooden arch was a hit, and within days, folks began collecting money to build a permanent version crafted of marble.
Almost 100 years later, Washington Square Arch is Greenwich Village's most famous landmark and the literal gateway to the great street.
Send me on. You see me here like this, why do you come around? You see me here.
If Henry James visited Washington Square today, he'd be shocked to see how the center of old New York's social universe has been turned into the playground of a city in need of a little elbow room.
Back in the 1800s, the aristocrats in the area were afraid that the wrong kind of people would invade their neighborhood. You know, people like foreigners and free thinkers. Well, here we are a century later, and it looks to me like it's Bohemians 1, Blue Bloods 0, and the greats. This is the southwest corner of the park, the home of a Washington Square tradition since the 1940s. That time-honored game of skill and strategy, also known here as the chess hustle. Okay, I'm gonna play Richie.
Mode him out personified.
Okay, Richie, you ready? How you doing?
Hey, man, how you
good,
doing?
Good,
Okay,
excellent,
how's
excellent.
everything, man?
Good.
You know?
So you afraid of me? You scared of me?
Yeah, there's a little fear, but I'll overcome, though. you
Okay,
know?
all right.
My daddy told me that, learn to overcome fear.
Okay.
You want to do this, huh?
You see the look in my eyes.
I
right?
understand
you see that
everything you're
tiger in
saying.
the eyes,
You know,
right?
I understand perfectly well what you're saying to me.
All right, yeah, that's it.
Okay,
I
hit
hit
your
this
card.
up.
You want to play another one?
Yeah, huh? Let's put the mojo on the board.
Well, this is over. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
What is it that you like about chess so much?
Oh, I like chess because you have the opportunity to impose your will upon another, and there's nothing they can do about it if you play the game properly. If you got somewhere to go, you're going to be here, come over here and lay. There's nothing in the drugstore that can save you right now. You belong to moi. Have a nice day.
Yeah, see now? I guess I gotta take some more mojo lessons, huh? Richie, man, thanks a lot. That was great. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Washington Square is the beginning, not only for a journey up Fifth Avenue, but for some, the road to success.
I lived in that building, 1 Fifth Avenue, that used to be the Fifth Avenue Hotel years ago, overlooking Washington Square. I loved that. I wrote the Heidi Chronicles, my play, at 1 Fifth Avenue. So I know the window that I was looking at. I mean, I know where I was when I got the call about the Pulitzer Prize.
By the end of the century, the social set abandoned Washington Square. They moved northward on Fifth Avenue, fleeing the tradesmen and immigrants who had begun to infiltrate the area. They would continue to move uptown once a generation, spurred by the cry of, "There goes the neighborhood."
The neighbors were totally beside themselves when the first store opened in 1870. It was a tailor, and he had the extraordinary name of Mr. G.D. Happy. So the neighbors said, "We'll put him out of business, then he won't be so goddamn happy."
As Fifth Avenue pushed uptown, the genteel row houses gave way to the luxury mansions of families with names like Belmont, Astor, and Vanderbilt. But the first decades of this century also brought enormous business vitality to the great street.
In fact, New York's first skyscraper was born on Fifth Avenue, in an area where Fifth Avenue and Broadway converged to form a pie-shaped wedge of land. That building is the Flatiron Building, and in 1902, it was considered an engineering marvel.
The 22-story cast-iron edifice takes its name from its distinctive triangular shape. Along with the Chrysler and Empire State Buildings, the Flatiron shares a nostalgic place in New Yorkers' hearts, not only because it was the first building to reach for the heavens, but because it remains one of the most beautiful. In the last 10 years, the Flatiron District has been recast as a fashion, advertising, and cyber business mecca. But the 10 blocks north houses a shabby collection of shops and fast food joints that seems to have forgotten its Fifth Avenue pedigree.
The paradox of Fifth Avenue is that since it encompasses such a long distance, that there are very many parts of it that are hardly high style.
Okay, I'll admit it, New Yorkers are probably the most blasé people in the world. Look behind me, for example. Here you have New Yorkers going back and forth in front of what is probably the most famous building in the whole world. And do they care? Do they look? No. But you, step back a little bit. Now look up. I mean way up. Behold the Empire State Building.
Most people would agree that the Empire State Building at the corner of 5th and 34th Street is one of the wonders of the modern world. Built during the early days of the Depression, Americans took comfort in the optimism of such an ambitious project. They saw a metaphor in the defiant thrust of steel and concrete, a talisman for better days ahead. It took 3,400 construction workers only 13.5 months to build the Empire State. 14 men lost their lives in the process. They used 10 million bricks and put in 7 miles of elevator shafts, climbing 102 stories. Of course, they also built 1,860 steps, in case you need the exercise.
Even today, no trip to New York City is complete without a visit to the Empire State Building. Over 3.5 million people a year plop their $6 down to take a trip up to the top of the world. Best place in New York City to hear people say, the people look like ants from here, in 50 different languages.
In Brazil, everybody knows Empire State.
It's got a bit of history to it. It's a magnificent building as well. I mean, if you ask someone, name a monument in New York, they'd say this.
People really do look like ants from here.
And of course, who could leave the summit without a little memento to commemorate the event? As much as the tourists love it, no one has come to the Empire State Building more often than 88-year-old Jack Broad.
You have to keep both eyes open. Keep both eyes open, otherwise you tire your eyes out.
He took an office for his Empire Diamond Company in June of 1931. and he's been here 6 days a week ever since.
I moved into the building at first because it was a good address, but I fell in love with the building because it has so much going for it that I really consider it like a cathedral of commerce.
For nearly 70 years, Jack has been there for every spectacle the Empire State has sustained. Blackouts, suicide leaps, the crash of a B-25 bomber into the side of the building. But to Jack, the most enduring memory has something to do with a gorilla and a blonde.
King Kong never came to the Empire State Building. He stayed out in Hollywood. I think he was afraid of New York. But it did make the building a little more romantic. My lease right now runs to the year 2000, and I'm going to sign my 8th and final lease, which will probably be to the year 2020.
There's little doubt that the great street has changed before Jack Broad's eyes. But there are anchors, enduring cultural and social landmarks that stand firm despite all the changes.
One of my favorite places is the New York Public Library. Like the great street that it sits on, it is both monumental and accessible. Now, the interesting thing about this library is that it is a research library, which means if you want to read a book, you can't check it out. You have to go inside to read it. And what an inside it is. Come on.
What makes us really quite extraordinary in New York is that virtually anybody can come to use these collections. You can step off an airplane at Kennedy from Azerbaijan, take a bus in, walk up the steps here at Fifth Avenue, fill out a call slip without showing a piece of identification, without paying a fee, without having a library card, and ask for a book and get it within 20 minutes.
The marble structure was completed in 1911, 9 years after the huge Croton Reservoir was drained to create a site for the library. This corner of 42nd Street and Fifth Avenue was considered the country only 50 years earlier. With the laying of the cornerstone in 1902, the library became the intellectual crossroads that would unite and inspire a city. One of the most valuable collections was donated by physician brothers Henry W. and Albert A. Berg. It contains extremely rare artifacts and manuscripts by some of the most renowned figures of English and American literature. Names like Mark Twain and Charles Dickens.
They get a sense of the person behind the words, and I think that's important to most people who read. They conjure up somebody that's the author, and if they can see a picture or what the handwriting looks like, it helps them to get a clearer picture of that person. This is the first of Virginia Woolf's diaries from Friday, January 1st, 1915. This is Dickens' own copy of A Christmas Carol, which he used to read from in his tours.
The actual dollar values of the items in the Berg collection are never disclosed, as much out of concern for security as respect for the material. But priceless is a word that comes to mind time and again.
The Thoreau manuscript was one that I discovered late one night preparing for an exhibit, and I didn't know what it was. I opened it up, and there were these leaves, grasses, flowers in there, and I said, oh my God, this is, Thoreau picked these, and I got this chill up the back of my spine. So I feel that in some sense these people are still alive through the objects, through the things that they wrote.
If the special collections are the heart of the library, then the reading room must be its soul.
Countless scholarly works, magazine articles, bestsellers, and even a few television shows have been researched and written at these long, polished oak tables. But in July of 1997, the room was closed for the most comprehensive restoration project in the library's history.
This is kind of like a giant, this old library. I was pretty excited because it's a historical renovation, which we don't do a whole lot of that. We do a lot of commercial work, so to come in on a building like this and see the beauty of it, and knowing that we're not going to modernize it, we're just going to kind of take it piece by piece and restore it to its original beauty, it's very exciting.
Somewhere up in here, I'll put my daughter's name, so she'll only know where it is, and I'll know where it is, and she'll come in one day, and I'll say, see up there? There's your name up there.
It took $15 million, 200 craftspeople, and 16 months to complete the restoration. They rebuilt the woodwork, refinished every piece of the original furniture, and brightened the frescoes.
The ceilings were entirely redone. The clouds were painted in a studio here in New York by an African-American painter, actually.
Oh, really?
And then put up like wallpaper. All the tabletops were done. The original chairs were brought back, or if we didn't have enough, we had copies made. The lamps had been painted blue. We brought them down to the original brass finishes.
And I notice here there's terminals, a number of them on each one of the tables. Tell me a little bit about the...
Well, we wanted to make the room a smart room in 21st century information technology terms, which means that we had a responsibility for making the tables adjustable for people's own information needs through laptop computers. So the architects drilled up through the floor below to bring the conduits up, channeled through the base of the table, and then ran troughs underneath each of the tabletops that contain the wires underneath.
Yes.
So it's all invisible and doesn't interfere at all with the aesthetics of the room.
So you've lived here most of your life. I'm sure you've made many trips to this library. What does it feel like to walk in here now and look at this room restored as beautifully as it is and be able to think, I did that?
Well, for me, this is like breathing pure oxygen. That's just how I feel when I come here. The library brings out the best in everybody. I think it brings out the best in readers, it brings out the best in administrators, it brings out the best in donors, either from the public or private sectors. And all that we're doing here today is intimately tied to our own notion of democracy in America, which basically is that the people have a right to free access to information. And if you give people that access to information, they become better citizens individually, and collectively, they make up a better citizenship.
The beginning of the 20th century saw the beginning of the end of the era of the grand private mansion on the great street. Marble palaces meant to stand for centuries were brought down only a few decades after they were built. In their place rose an opulent shopper's paradise that came to symbolize Fifth Avenue.
People came to Fifth Avenue to buy something they couldn't buy anywhere else. They couldn't buy it in a department store on Herald Square or 14th Street or Cleveland, Ohio. The stores were very different. The stores were never crowded. They had beautiful wood floors and plaster ceilings and light fixtures that were made to order.
The first department store on Fifth Avenue was B. Altman's turn-of-the-century showplace on the corner of 34th Street. At the opposite end of this corridor of plenty, Bergdorf Goodman still stands at 58th Street, on the site of a former Vanderbilt mansion. The 24 blocks in between offered a fantastic array of merchandise in stores like no others in the world.
As a destination, Fifth Avenue was always a place that you had to get dressed up for.
The competition of the window decorators and the stores themselves with one another did and truly make it exciting. And you saw people who were indeed window shopping. It was one of the things you really wanted to do.
Fifth Avenue was a pedestrian wonderland. You could cross from street to street. Even if you had no money, there was something to look at, to gaze at, to dream about.
Sadly, by the 1970s, shoppers' habits began to change, and one by one, most of the great emporia of Fifth Avenue were torn down.
When a number of the stores closed in the 1970s, they didn't close because their clientele had died or they ran out of merchandise. They closed because their real estate was so valuable for something else.
Today, among major American department stores, only Saks Fifth Avenue, Bergdorf Goodman, and Lord & Taylor remain on the Great Street. But that doesn't mean there's nothing left to buy. Shopping is still the #1 reason people visit Fifth Avenue. Tens of billions of dollars, okay, you caught me, some of them are mine, are spent each year on this great street in shops that consider their address almost as important as their inventory.
It has the greatest property, the highest rentals, the most exotic stores. It has the most famous people. You walk down Fifth Avenue, you will bump into Cindy Crawford on one side, you'll see Al Pacino on another, and they're going into stores. And where are they going into them? They're going into them on Fifth Avenue.
At the corner of Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street, big ticket shopping is a manly thing.
At Nat Sherman's, the ambiance is clubby and masculine. Here they elevate the art of the cigar from mere stogie chomping to an experience to be savored.
Smoking cigars really becomes a way of life. It's a passion for a lot of people, and how you accessorize that as well as what you smoke is very important to people. So between the cutters and humidors and different smoking articles or smoking related accessories, that is as much of what you smoke.
A humidor larger than some New York apartments houses a huge variety of cigars, some blended especially for status-seeking smokers. Although the store looks as if it's been there since the turn of the century, Nat Sherman's came to Fifth Avenue after many years on Broadway. The original store on Broadway gave the founder of the company easy access to the world of showbiz, a world Nat Sherman has catered to ever since.
We still get many celebrities come in here, and the one that I get the biggest kick out of is Harry Connick Jr., because when he comes in, he'll sometimes sit at the piano and play a tune too, and I find that, with no disrespect to your piano playing,
So come on, does he play as good as me?
Certainly a very enjoyable moment.
And I bet he gets money in his tip jar, huh?
I would think so.
In most stores, the merchandise takes center stage. But on Fifth Avenue, sometimes the architecture is the star of the show. In 1991, the women's specialty retailer Henry Bendel acquired a Fifth Avenue address when they moved into a glittering space that had been the house of Coty Cosmetics.
It was a wonderful example of preserving the past to make way for a new development.
The renovation project uncovered a hidden art treasure obscured by decades of city soot and grime.
Francois Coty was a style innovator from the turn of the century. One of the things that Francois Coty understood most was the importance of packaging, and he hired René Lalique to design the bottles for his original fragrance company. And as a result of their collaboration, we're standing in front of one of the most beautiful expanses, in fact, the only expanse in North America, of Lalique glass.
The windows, the tea room with its ladylike menu, the stylish, confident clientele. It all adds up to an experience that evokes the memory of Holly Golightly, a rare breed seldom seen anymore, even on this great street.
that Harry Winston is Fifth Avenue. I think that our gates and our receptionist and our security up front have long been part of the rich heritage and history of Harry Winston. And they're not meant to be intimidating. Understand that it should be an aspirational experience. You should feel excited about it. And the intimidation, well, I think that just makes your purchase a little bit more exciting and a little bit more special.
Harry Winston is the only jeweler on Fifth Avenue that actually creates their product here upstairs.
We're in the workroom 4 floors above the salon, where these incredible artisans are doing their work. Hey, Packy, how you doing?
Fine, how are you?
You mind if I join you here?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So how do you get started in a business like this?
Well, my situation was that my family was in the jewelry business, my grandfather, my father, so I started as 12 years old.
It takes weeks to make a piece sometimes, correct?
Yes, sometimes it'll take months, depending on the piece.
What is it that you're working on right now?
I'm working on a ring, the 3-stone ring. This is the design that came to me for this. This is an emerald.
Yes.
It's a cabochon, has no facets. This will fit here. I'm putting what is going to hold the center stone, which we call prongs.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm putting the last one, as you can see here, will be the 4th one here, like this.
Yes.
The stone here, this is what the stone is going to go. After it comes out of my hand, it goes to be polished, which is a different procedure. That I don't do that, somebody else does.
Yes.
And then it goes to a setter, who is going to set the stones. Every design has its own challenge. That's the beauty on this place.
This is going to be beautiful. It'd be great to see that on somebody's finger.
Harry Winston is still a family business, run today by a grandson of the founder.
Harry Winston has long been jeweler to the royalty and jeweler to the stars. There's nothing unaffordable because America and the world today are very, very rich. But something that might not be affordable to everybody would be this pear-shaped diamond engagement ring set in platinum. And this gem sells for $1.2 million.
Fifth Avenue has always been like a pane of glass, there for the little guy to press his nose against and dream.
But in the last few years, things have changed on the avenue of aspiration. You can hear it in that old familiar cry of, "There goes the neighborhood." And the new word that's being bantered about is that 4-letter one, M-A-L-L.
You know, you'll hate to be somebody who sort of sits around and goes, oh, 30 years ago, it was so great. But you know what? It was. That's the truth of it. Listen, long-time New Yorker, you take great pride in the place that you're from, sort of setting the pace for the rest of the world. You decide this defines elegance. Disney and Warner's don't come from places that are the home of great streets.
I think, in all fairness, the streets have always been malls. New York City is basically one big shopping mall. I mean, you still have the great and rich stores, but you also have a different kind of a store coming there. You're really creating more of a mix now on Fifth Avenue.
The Warner Brothers store on Fifth Avenue and 57th Street did $100 million in business its first year. It shows that it meets the demand.
To many people, especially those from outside New York, Fifth Avenue is a mythic destination, the swanky center of a sophisticated universe. But consider this, pushcarts outnumber restaurants at least 50 to 1. There are no charming sidewalk cafes, no celebrity watering holes on this great street, no nightlife, no supper clubs, no theaters. After Dark glitter on Fifth Avenue is a seasonal offering, only seen during the week surrounding Christmas. Lord & Taylor in particular cherishes its Yuletide role on Fifth Avenue. For 86 years, they have inaugurated the holiday season with the creation of spectacular mechanical window displays.
It is a lot of work, but it's done with a lot of love. We really truly feel that this is our gift to the public out there in New York.
It takes almost 60 people the better part of a year to plan and execute the detailed designs. Because Lord & Taylor is the only Fifth Avenue department store with a hydraulic system for its display windows, each scene can be crafted at the basement level. Then, during a nighttime gala the week before Thanksgiving, the 6 windows are dramatically elevated into place. The unveiling of these scenes draws thousands each year in a tradition meant to tether the present to the past.
It's really a great feeling to be out there in the middle of everybody, not telling you who you are, and just seeing the reaction of the public. And the kids, they just go crazy.
The other 11 months of the year, Fifth Avenue is kind of like a kaleidoscope. It's best when viewed in broad daylight. And what better time to appreciate the energy, the excitement, the sense of fun, and the diversity of New York City than on a warm summer day like today, when Fifth Avenue becomes a parade route. As a matter of fact, this is a tradition that's gone back to the 19th century.
The Easter Parade had its start as servants hanging around on Fifth Avenue after the Easter service, which was 11 o'clock in St. Thomas Church. The parishioners would be fabulously dressed, and the servants would be standing on the steps and standing around looking to see what everybody else's mistress was wearing. And that was the start of the Easter Parade.
150 Easters have come and gone since then. So have scores of Puerto Rico days, Israel days, Greek days, St. Patrick's Day. But no Fifth Avenue parade has more traffic-stopping displays than the annual celebration of gay and lesbian pride. Only St. Patrick's Day draws a larger crowd to the great street.
I've always loved parades on Fifth Avenue, and this parade is one of the really very nicest ones, one of the best, but we have a lot of them. And it's a wonderful way for people to celebrate what they are, who they are, and what they want to be. It's tremendous. Look how joyous this was.
On Gay Pride Day, the center line is painted lavender in honor of the celebrants. Here we are, 150 years after the very first Easter parade on Fifth Avenue, and people are still craning their necks to see what everyone's wearing. Or in some cases, what they're not wearing.
Like any of the world's great streets, Fifth Avenue has its share of historic sites and architectural treasures. Along Museum Mile, priceless collections of antiquity and culture are preserved and displayed for the world to enjoy in treasure houses like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Frick Collection, and the architecturally adventurous Guggenheim. The imposing houses of worship are still part of the landscape, declaring their various belief systems in limestone and marble. But Fifth Avenue is the only great street to have a front yard. The New Yorkers call it Central Park.
What makes it wonderful is, first, its location, because it is the largest urban park in the middle of highly developed residential areas. The city people had the vision 150 years ago to lay this out as a park at a time when the city didn't go that far north and it was largely uninhabited.
Today, there are only 54 buildings that line Fifth Avenue overlooking Central Park. If you're interested in buying a co-op apartment in one of these babies, it'll only cost just somewhere in the low 7 figures. And that's just for a fixer-upper.
It's not only old New York families that like Fifth Avenue, but it is the place to make a statement for families from around America, for entertainers, for conglomerateurs, for entrepreneurs who have recently come into power, influence, and money. And there's nothing more that they want in terms of status than to see the Fifth Avenue address on their linen note cards from Tiffany's.
The folks who are lucky enough to dwell in such elegance, with sweeping views of Central Park as their window treatments, know that city life does have its rewards, if you're in the right part of the city.
People say, why do you want to live in the city? Don't you want to live in the country and see trees? Hey, I got all the trees there are. I look out on Central Park. I don't need to go anywhere to look at a tree.
For most of the 19th century, Central Park was a wilderness dotted with makeshift houses. In 1848, Frederick Law Olmsted devised a grand design for the rectangular space, incorporating areas for recreation with places for quiet contemplation.
The 843 acres are visited by 15 million people a year who come here to skate, jog, and play a game of softball.
Go, run!
Tucked inside the vastness of Central Park is a lush, beautiful enclave. It's really a secret garden. And these gates used to stand at the Vanderbilt estate at 58th and 5th. They now stand here at 105th and 5th and lead into the Conservatory Gardens, a whole other world.
The garden is nestled below street level, near the site of a battle from the War of 1812. The design, graceful alleys, fanciful fountains, and an Italianate pergola might make you feel as if the Conservatory Garden has been here as long as Fifth Avenue. But you'd be wrong.
This garden was opened in September of 1937, so we're talking about 62 years now. It replaced some conservatories that were actually on this site, Victorian greenhouses that were a very popular tourist attraction. It became a WPA project. They used Parks Department architects, and the garden opened to much fanfare.
What kind of people use this place? What kind of, do tourists come here or
we
natives?
Get a lot. We get every kind of person. We have a lot of tourists. We have a lot of European tour groups that come through. The garden is sort of on a garden tour loop. And of course, here we are in East Harlem. There are lots of neighborhood people who visit every day. We have a lot of regulars and people from all over. It's a great mix of people, the best.
The Conservatory Garden is a 4-season show with special plantings geared to each month of the year, as well as perennial foliage. Even in the fallow months of fall, the garden staff, plus some volunteers and visitors, work at what some think is the best job in New York.
How many people can do this in a park like Central Park, you know, arguably one of the most important pieces of real estate in the world. And here I am, sitting in this beautiful garden, where every day somebody comes to me and thanks me for doing my job.
Central Park is as close to the great outdoors as many New Yorkers ever get. But the open spaces and quiet corners are also a boundary. For once above the northernmost reaches of Central Park, Fifth Avenue sheds her finery. Not all of the great street is paved with gold. At 110th Street, Fifth Avenue rolls on into Harlem, where the gilding is a little harder to find.
If there's stores on this side of Fifth Avenue, you better believe that they've got metal gates in front of them. You can't window shop at night in Harlem.
Still, there is life here and vitality and a history that is as interesting and as varied as the people that live here in the capital of Black America.
Harlem was founded by Dutch settlers who came to what was called New Amsterdam in the 17th century. But the northward migration of freed slaves looking for work after the Civil War made Harlem a destination for African Americans, and later, a cultural epicenter.
Harlem has always been a place that has had some special flavor that other people in the world wanted to taste. So this is where we are, in the home of this special energy that black folks have honed and have nurtured for years.
When I finally came up to Harlem, there was so much beauty, there was so much warmth and passion there. But then at the same time, I realized that here was an opportunity for me to, you know, become part of this wonderful scene of black history and phenomena, and it was a joy.
One of the touchstones of Harlem is Marcus Garvey Park at 5th Avenue and 124th Street. This is the place where rap music had its genesis. The Last Poets were a group of men who used spoken verse to stir passions and raise consciousness.
For the millions of Africans chained to the slave ships.
Dun Oyewale and Umar bin Hassan were original members of that first trio, formed in 1968 at a rally held on this site when it was still called Mount Morris Park. The poetry, accompanied by the rhythms of a group of drummers, electrified the crowds. Although other members of the Last Poets have come and gone, Dun and Umar still live in the neighborhood.
Yo, you boys see how huh?
The audience is younger, but still looks for answers to the hard questions in life.
Did you study Marcus Garvey in class at all?
No, I'm studying we're studying
Check this out. Marcus Garvey was a man who was Jamaican, born with eyes piercing like a panther and a voice like a horn and like Gabriel. He called the people together. He said, been winter too long. It's time to change the weather. One God, one aim, one destiny was the creed of the man named Marcus Garvey. He came and walked. The media doesn't give Harlem many positive checks in any newspaper. I mean, they don't talk about Harlem like in the glory that it should be spoken about. Talk about it like there's some major ruins and that everything is just decaying or dead or just like the scab of an open wound of something. And we've got life here. We've got a healing force that still remains. So when I see these kids, my very existence is affirmed when I see these children.
Over the years, gentrification has mostly eluded Harlem, but that neglect has kept much of the 19th century architecture intact, including these row houses built as employee residences by the Astor family. And this, the oldest house on the island of Manhattan, still standing after 140 years.
One woman fell in love with Harlem's opulent past and decided to make it her future. She found an old brownstone, fixed it up, turned it into a bed and breakfast, and now hopes to spur her own Harlem Renaissance.
The first time I saw a brownstone, the space was just so regal. I thought, how wonderful to be able to have that kind of space in a city.
Jane Alex Mendelssohn's dream took her far north of her corporate life and her midtown neighborhood to the threshold of a rambling wreck. But where others saw a flea bag, Jane imagined a showplace where overnight guests could recapture the elegance that was Harlem's pedigree.
Well, the house had been an SRO, a single-room occupancy house, which had been cut up like many of the houses in this neighborhood and throughout New York. But fortunately, the woodwork was still here. These pocket doors are one of my very favorite things. The wood is just so phenomenal, and it's completely different on each side, and the fireplaces are wonderful.
After 12 months of restoration, the Urban Gem Bed and Breakfast welcomed its first visitors in June of 1998. Today, Jane offers up not only hospitality, but a little history, too.
I've had people from all sorts of countries in Europe. I had a lot of Japanese guests early on. I've had a number of people from Mexico, all different places. So I get to sort of be a tour guide, and it's fun to sort of see the city through their eyes when they get to explore it for the first time.
Okay, so I'm sure it's not lost on you that you're one of the few white people that live here in Harlem. Do you feel like a fish out of water sometimes?
When I first came up here, yes, I felt very self-conscious. The first few times I took the subway up and I'd get off and I'd feel like, you know, I'm the only white person around. But the people in the neighborhood, I didn't get any sense that they were looking at me and saying, oh, look, she doesn't belong or she's different. The community is so open and welcoming. You know, I think you get back a lot of what you put out.
Jane isn't alone investing in Harlem's future. A number of African-American-owned businesses are beginning to revitalize the neighborhood, too. It's all good news for Jane, who still thrills to the sound of her uptown address.
Well, it's actually 2005 Fifth Avenue. It's the whole number that works for me.
If you spend a day walking this great street, you'll see the history of a city. But more than that, you'll learn the stories of people who came to New York because they wanted a piece of the dream.
New York is more than just a great city within the United States. It's really a great city within the world. It's almost like the world capital. And I think Fifth Avenue represents the ultimate in that great city.
Fifth Avenue has no props in Harlem, basically. If you tell somebody you live on Fifth Avenue in Harlem, it means absolutely nothing.
Well, what it is that we just walk through there to get here.
What's great about Fifth Avenue is it is a real place where you can walk, where there are parades, where there is a gathering, but it's also romantic. It's also kept a romantic aspiration to it.
I think of the great streets of the world, none begins in a marble arch in a beautiful square with Georgian houses and ends 6.5 miles later in used car lots.
There is no other street like Fifth Avenue. If you put a blue dot in the center of the universe, it would be New York, Fifth Avenue, United States of America. There ain't anything else. That's it.
They are powerful words, Fifth Avenue, filled with the promise of something extraordinary. And though not everyone's dream comes true, for the many people that have come before, and for the millions that are yet to walk this great street, there's something to be said for just taking the trip. I'm Brian Stokes Mitchell, and thanks for taking the trip with me.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
This is PBS.